A dragon is a large magical legendary creature that appears in the folklore of many cultures worldwide. Beliefs about dragons vary considerably through regions, but dragons in Western cultures since the High Middle Ages have often been depicted as winged, horned, and capable of breathing fire. Dragons in Eastern cultures are usually depicted as wingless, four-legged, serpentine creatures with above-average intelligence. Commonalities between dragons' traits are often a hybridization of feline, reptilian, mammal, and avian features. Scholars believe vast extinct or migrating crocodiles bear the closest resemblance, especially when encountered in forested or swampy areas, and are most likely the template of modern Oriental dragon imagery. The word dragon entered the English language in the early 13th century from Old French dragon, which in turn comes from the Latin dracon nominative draco, meaning huge serpent, dragon from ancient Greek delta rho alpha kappa omega nu draken, genitive delta rho alpha kappa omicron nu tau omicron sigma drakentos serpent 4-5. The Greek and Latin term referred to any great serpent, not necessarily mythological. 6. The Greek word delta rho alpha kappa omega nu is most likely derived from the Greek verb delta epsilon rho kappa omicron nu alpha iota decime, meaning I see, the aorist form of which is epsilon delta rho alpha kappa omicron nu edraken. 5. This is thought to have referred to something with a deadly glance, 7, or unusually bright, 8, or sharp, 9, 10 eyes, or because a snake's eyes appear to be always open. Each eye actually sees through a big transparent scale in its eyelids, which are permanently shut. The Greek word probably derives from an Indo-European base asterisk dik minus, meaning to see. The Sanskrit root drive s minus also means to see. Argues that, like many other creations of traditional cultures, dragons are largely explicable as products of a convergence of rational pre-scientific speculation about the world of real events. In this case, the event is the natural mechanism governing rainfall and drought, with particular attention paid to the phenomenon of the rainbow. In Egyptian mythology, Apep or Apophis is a giant serpentine creature who resides in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. 2425. The Bremna Rind papyrus, written around 310 BC, preserves an account of a much older Egyptian tradition that the setting of the sun is caused by Ra descending to the Duat to battle Apep. 2425. In some accounts, Apep is as long as the height of 8 men with a head made of flint. 25. Thunderstorms and earthquakes were thought to be caused by Apep's Ra. 26. And solar eclipses were thought to be the result of Apep attacking Ra during the daytime. 26. In some myths, Apep is slain by the god Set. 27. Neopkul is another giant serpent who guards the Duat and aided Ra in his battle against Apep. 26. Neopkul was so massive in some stories that the entire earth was believed to rest atop his coils. 26. Denwin is a giant serpent mentioned in the pyramid texts whose body was made of fire and who ignited a conflagration that nearly destroyed all the gods of the Egyptian pantheon. 28. He was ultimately defeated by the pharaoh, a victory which affirmed the pharaoh's divine right to rule. 29. The Ouroboros was a well-known Egyptian symbol of a serpent swallowing its own tail. 30. The precursor to the Ouroboros was the many-faced 30, a serpent with 5 heads who, according to the Mjuat, the oldest surviving book of the afterlife, was said to coil around the corpse of the sun god Ra protectively. 30. The earliest surviving depiction of a true Ouroboros comes from the gilded shrines in the tomb of Tutankhamun. 30. In the early centuries AD, the Ouroboros was adopted as a symbol by Gnostic Christians. 31. And chapter 136 of the Pistis Sophia, an early Gnostic text, describes a great dragon whose tail is in its mouth. 31. In medieval alchemy, the Ouroboros became a typical Western dragon with wings, legs, and a tail. 30. A famous image of the dragon kneeling on its tail from the 11th century Codex Marcinus was copied in numerous works on alchemy. Ancient people across the Near East believed in creatures similar to what modern people call dragons. 33. These ancient people were unaware of the existence of dinosaurs or similar creatures in the distant past. 33. References to dragons of both benevolent and malevolent characters occur throughout ancient Mesopotamian literature. 33. In Sumerian poetry, great kings are often compared to the Usumbul, a gigantic Serpentine monster 33. A draconic creature with the forepart of a lion and the hind legs, tail and wings of a bird appears in Mesopotamian artwork from the Akkadian period c. 2334 to 2154 BC until the Neo-Babylonian period 626 BC 539 BC 34. The dragon is usually shown with its mouth open. 34. It may have been known as the Umuneiru, which means roaring weather beast. 34. And may have been associated with the god Ishka-Hadad. 34. A slightly different lion dragon with two horns and the tail of a scorpion appears in art from the Neo-Assyrian period 911 BC 609 BC 34. A relief probably commissioned by Sennacherib shows the gods Ashur-Sin and Adad standing on its back. 34. Another draconic creature with horns, the body and neck of a snake, the forelegs of a lion and the hind legs of a bird appears in Mesopotamian art from the Akkadian period until the Hellenistic period 323 BC 31 BC 32. This creature, known in Akkadian as the Mushasu meaning furious serpent, was used as a symbol for particular deities and also as a general protective emblem. 32. It seems to have originally been the attendant of the underworld god Ninazu. 32. But later became the attendant to the Hurrian storm god Tishbak, as well as later Ninazu's son Nishida. The Babylonian national god Marduk, the scribal god Nabu, and the Assyrian national god Ashur. 32. Scholars disagree regarding the appearance of Tiamat, the Babylonian goddess personifying primeval chaos slain by Marduk in the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish 35-36. She was traditionally regarded by scholars as having had the form of a giant serpent. 36. But several scholars have pointed out that this shape cannot be imputed to Tiamat with certainty. 36. And she seems to have at least sometimes been regarded as anthropomorphic. 35-36. Nonetheless, in some texts, she seems to be described with horns, a tail, and a height that no weapon can penetrate. 35. All features which suggest she was conceived as some form of dragoness. In the Ugaritic Baal cycle, the sea dragon Latanu is described as the twisting serpent / the powerful one with 7 heads. 37. In KTU 1.5i2-3 Latanu is slain by the storm god Baal. 37. But in KTU 1.3341-42 he is instead slain by the virgin warrior goddess Anat. 37. In the book of Psalms, Psalm 74 13-14 the sea dragon Leviathan is slain by Yam, god of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah as part of the creation of the world. 37-38. In Isaiah 27:1 Yahweh's destruction of Leviathan is foretold as part of his impending overhaul of the universal order. Job 41:1-34 contains a detailed description of the Leviathan, who is described as being so powerful that only Yam can overcome it. 42. Job 41:19-21 states that the Leviathan exhales fire and smoke, making its identification as a mythical dragon clearly apparent. 42. In some parts of the Old Testament, the Leviathan is historicized as a symbol for the nations that stand against Yam. 38. Rahab, a synonym for Leviathan, is used in several biblical passages in reference to Egypt. 38. Isaiah 37 declares, "For Egypt's help is worthless and empty, therefore I have called her the silenced Rahab." 38. Similarly, Psalm 87:3 reads, "I reckon Rahab and Babylon as those that know me." 38. In Ezekiel 29:3-5 and Ezekiel 32:2-8 the Pharaoh of Egypt is described as a dragon. Tannan 38. In the story of Bel and the dragon from the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel sees a dragon being worshipped by the Babylonians. 43. Daniel makes cakes of pitch, fat and hair. 43. The dragon eats them and bursts open. The story of a hero slaying a giant serpent occurs in almost all Indo-European mythology. 89-90. In most stories, the hero is some kind of thunder god. 90. In nearly every iteration of the story, the serpent is either multi-headed or multiple in some other way. 89. Furthermore, In nearly every story, the serpent is always somehow associated with water. 90 Bruce Lincoln has proposed that a Proto-Indo-European dragon-slaying myth can be reconstructed as follows. 91-92 First, the sky gods give cattle to a man named Tritos III, who is so named because he is the third man on earth. 91-92 But a three-headed serpent named Ngy steals them. 91-92 Tritos pursues the serpent and is accompanied by Hannah, whose name means man. 91-92 Together, the two heroes slay the serpent and rescue the cattle. The ancient Greek word, usually translated as dragon delta rho alpha kappa omega nu draken, genitive delta rho alpha kappa omicron nu tau omicron drakentos, could also mean snake. 93-6, but it usually refers to a kind of giant serpent that either possesses supernatural characteristics or is otherwise controlled by some supernatural power. 94 The first mention of a dragon in ancient Greek literature occurs in the Iliad, in which Agamemnon is described as having a blue dragon motif on his sword belt and an emblem of a three-headed dragon on his breastplate. 95 In lines 820 to 880 of the Theogony, a Greek poem written in the 7th century BC by the Boeotian poet Hesiod, the Greek god Zeus battles the monster Typhon, who has 100 serpent heads that breathe fire and make many frightening animal noises. 85 Zeus screeches all of Typhon's heads with his lightning bolts, and then hurls Typhon into Tartarus. 96 In the Homeric hymn to Apollo, the god Apollo uses his poisoned arrows to slay the serpent Python, who has been causing death and pestilence in the area around Delphi. 97 96 98 Apollo then sets up his shrine there. 96 The Roman poet Virgil, in his poem Culex, lines 163-201, describing a shepherd having a fight with a big constricting snake, calls it serpens and also draco, showing that in his time the two words were probably interchangeable. Dragons and dragon motifs are featured in many works of modern literature, particularly within the fantasy genre. 177-178 As early as the 18th century, critical thinkers such as Denis Diderot were already asserting that too much literature had been published on dragons. There are already in books all too many fabulous stories of dragons. 179 In Lewis Carroll's classic children's novel Through the Looking Glass 1872, one of the inset poems describes the Jabberwock, a kind of dragon. 12 Carroll's illustrator John Tenniel, a famous political cartoonist, humorously showed the Jabberwock with the waistcoat buck teeth and myopic eyes of a Victorian university lecturer, such as Carroll himself. 12 In works of comedic children's fantasy, dragons often fulfill the role of a magic fairy tale helper. 180 In such works, rather than being frightening as they are traditionally portrayed, dragons are instead represented as harmless, benevolent, and inferior to humans. 180 They are sometimes shown living in contact with humans, or in isolated communities of only dragons. 180 Though popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, such comic and idyllic stories began to grow increasingly rare after the 1960s, due to demand for more serious children's literature. 180 One of the most iconic modern dragons is Smaug from J.R.R. Tolkien's classic novel The Hobbit. 177 Dragons also appear in the best-selling Harry Potter series of children's novels by J.K. Rowling. 12 Other prominent works depicting dragons include Emma Caffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern, Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea Cycle, George R.R. Martin's series A Song of Ice and Fire, and Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle. Sandra Martina Squab writes, with a few exceptions including McCaffrey's Pern novels and the 2002 film Reign of Fire, dragons seem to fit more into the medievalized setting of fantasy literature than into the more technological world of science fiction. Indeed, they have been called the emblem of fantasy. The hero's fight against the dragon emphasizes and celebrates his masculinity, whereas revisionist fantasies of dragons and dragon-slaying often undermine traditional gender roles. In children's literature, the friendly dragon becomes a powerful ally in battling the child's fears. 181 The popular role-playing game system Dungeons & Dragons D&D makes heavy use of dragons.